All right, we are expecting, of course, the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, Mr. Kabelo Gwamanda, to address the public a little bit later on following the gas explosion incident in the Johannesburg CBD. But I am now joined by Stan Bezuidenhout, and he's a forensic investigator, to discuss this further. Stan, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Just talk to us about just the developments, of since this explosion has happened and how the city as well as the province have handled it thus far. Your thoughts?
So first of all, by the way, good afternoon and hello to your listeners. I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't got answers yet, because it's surprising to me that we have this much time passing and so much technology assigned. I know drones have been used, inspections have been done, etc. I'm a little bit surprised that we don't have any kind of answers, because in an explosion of this kind, the three most important components to actually look at are the source, or where this explosion would have come from. And already I can tell you that from the social media videos that I've seen, I've been able to see that there's kind of a propagation path. The video showing the taxi's explosion, you can see them running in sequence, so it's easy to determine at least the direction the explosion is running in. Secondly, you've got to find whether there are any gases staying behind or any sources of gas in the area. We haven't even heard where the gas came from or what kind of gas we have as a conclusion. And then thirdly, you should be able to follow that back to the source and to find the possible ignition or whatever led to that explosion. Now, if we are talking about methane, as I've heard, it's lighter than air. So that means that the source of the explosion couldn't even have been above ground. And coincidentally, methane you cannot even smell. So people might not even have been aware that there's a gas around, and it might have ignited by somebody making food or a vehicle or whatever. So I'm a bit surprised we don't have any answers really that we can use or take away, but we'll have to see what the mayor reports today.
What is the responsibility in situations like this of the city? I mean, as you say, we haven't received answers. There's still so much speculation in terms of what really caused this, and the source has not been established. And of course, what is of concern is what is happening underground the city, as we've heard, in recent reports. But what is the city's responsibility in this disaster?
So we must understand that the city's responsibility is towards the establishment of the source and the cause of the explosion, not so much the reporting to the public. So I know that it makes people unhappy that the city hasn't reported yet, but obviously the big risk is that they report preemptively and report to information that's not established yet. So I'd say the bigger responsibility on city lies in firstly testing the existing infrastructure to see if there's anything that was compromised in any way, apologies. And then if nothing has been compromised, to look at possible sources of the gas and to try and see if there are any, gases staying behind that are still emanating in the area, because you might have an explosion today and a new build-up tomorrow in a bigger area because you now have an open road. So in my mind, the duty and responsibility of the city is to properly map the crime scene, to properly map and reconstruct the explosion's evolution, and from that to at least try and determine the direction in which the explosion propagated, and from that try and make a determination. There are parts of the road that are obviously damaged, and some of the superstructure or the infrastructure has collapsed, so it makes it more difficult to get in there. So it could be a physical thing. You can't just go in there with heavy equipment and start digging in case you open up new gas pipes or additional sources, and then you might have additional explosions. But most certainly, it's a little bit surprising that it's taking so long, because it was immediately a secured crime, or at least incident scene at that stage. It would have been possible to start the investigation. And I think what would have probably worked better is if there was a constant trickle of information coming from the city to keep the public abreast, because people might be in the immediate vicinity, although not in the scene, and might even be exposed to risk. And we won't know that if we don't know the nature of what we are dealing with.
And of course, what is concerning, as you say, in terms of the lack of report back, this happened about two or so weeks ago. What is concerning is that this was not the only explosion per se in Gauteng. I mean, we experienced, I think, 2 others during the same period, during the same month. So the concern for a lot of residents is we're not getting to the bottom of what what is causing these explosions? I mean, we obviously know that Easy Gas has distanced itself from this particular explosion that we are discussing now. So we're not getting to the source of these explosions fast enough. So the concern then is, are we then able to prevent such going forward?
Well, for starters, I have to admit that it's three completely different kinds of incidents. We have one incident involving LP gas, another involving another kind of gas that's used in some kind of gold processing, and then now this, which is kind of an unknown source. What surprises me is how much gas is around people in general and how we don't have preemptive mechanisms and sensor mechanisms in place. Like in the US, where I spent quite a bit of time, the installation and presence of gas monitors is a huge issue, and it's a constant reminder. You're not even allowed to have a gas bottle inside your camper without having monitors installed. So I'm surprised that in South Africa, we kind of tend to be reactive, not proactive. We wait for a certain trend to develop, and then we try and fix those trends. But more than that, we cannot say until we know exactly what the cause of this particular explosion was, or more importantly, where it started and how that gas was ignited, because that's what we're after. We want to know what was it that caused the gas to ignite, and then we want to find out where the gas comes from, and then we want to find out why it was there and how it.
Stan, I'm not sure if I've lost you, but I want to ask you just one last question. I mean, also presuming, of course, that the mayor will give us all these answers that you speak to. But last question from me, you know, as a forensic investigator, how worried are you just about the lack of infrastructure maintenance that we are seeing in the country, particularly, of course, in Gauteng? All right, I think we've lost Stan's sound there, but that was Stan Bezuidenhout, and of course he's a forensic investigator, and he's obviously talking about that press briefing that we are expecting to go into, and that is where the Johannesburg mayor is going to brief the city and of course the province around just how and what caused that explosion that we saw in July.